All right, you guys, welcome back to another episode of The Common Theory. I'm your man Chris, along here with my man Dallas, and we have promised you, of course, the second episode of this tier list. So if you haven't seen the first part of this, definitely go back, watch the first part, and then come back here to see the follow up. But with that short little intro, I think, what are you about, man? You ready to do
Yeah,
this?
let's just hop right on into it.
All right, go for it, man. What do
Yeah,
we got?
so our next deck on the docket here is Viscoba Guildmage. This is a deck
This
that
is
has obviously performed well in tournament recently, so there's probably going to be some recency bias here. But yeah, I think this is a strong Orzhov option in general. I think Orzhov One thing Orzhov really struggles with in our format is just the commander options aren't amazing in general. And I think Viscopa is just a very strong commander, similar to most of the guild mages that are viable in our format. It's really strong because its activated abilities are strong, which means it can kind of play around counter spells through those means. It's got life gain to deal with control or aggro decks. It's got quick burn that's ability based to deal with control. It can take out players fast if you build it that way, but the main tool it has against combo is just being Orzhov and having lots of removal. So, what are your thoughts on this deck?
I'm actually going to compare this a little bit to Parcel Beast. Now, with that said, I don't believe it goes in the same tier as Parcel Beast. But something unique that this deck does is that you never really know what variant you're playing against when you play this deck, right? So you could be playing a very fast, aggressive rituals combo variant, or you could be playing a slow control, grindy variant. The possibilities that Orzhov brings to the table is a lot more than meets the eye, right? So you need to kind of figure out when you're playing against the Viscopa, like what's happening in those first few couple of turns. Like, are they ramping extremely? Like, what's happening? So you could kind of base your game plan on what they have going on, right? And the deck has so many very neat packages, like with the Rebels and just the basic life gain is absolutely fantastic with a deck like this. Um, the other unique part that I really appreciate about Viscopa specifically is once you do establish that large amount of mana, you're able to just continuing to put triggers on the stack. And it's irrelevant of what else is going on. As long as you have that life gain spell, you're able to kill the table. So the uniqueness of this deck is a very big deal. And also too, similar to Parcel Beast, your opponents might not know how to play against it because this deck is also incredibly complicated. So, with that said, what do you think?
One other thing I do want to bring up real quick is I think the downshifts really help the control variants of this deck, with
Oh, very
Generous
much.
Gift being able to pop lands that are enchanted for controlling those Simic decks and the new board wipe. Not to mention, you
Yep.
already get to play so many board wipes because you don't care too much about your life total as much because you have that life gain. So it naturally makes cards like Pestilence and Oubliette better.
Yep. And also, too, you get the Dread Return, right? So you're able to actually bring back Viscopa, maybe play it a little bit prematurely, right? So,
Yeah. I think I like this deck in A tier. I think
uh,
it's strong.
agreed. Yeah, it's a strong deck. I mean, the deck is powerful. We spoke a lot about the deck prior to RIW, and it was just amazing to see Paul do what he did with the deck, and yeah, I really like
Uh,
this deck.
where Since we're kind of doing an ordered list, where do you want to put it in A tier?
um well, I think if we're going to do that, we need to move Abdel all the way to the end. Let's be realistic, because it's the only one not proven yet at this point, right?
You want
Dargo
Abdel at the
Keleth.
bottom, huh?
Yeah, Dargo Keleth right in front of Abdel, because that's a easy match for that deck to win. I like it right up there with Gut and Third Path. I think those are the two that need to
Whew.
stay up at the high rankings.
You like
So I
Viscopa better than Is It?
no, right right with it, not between it, with it, like with them. So
Ah,
I would say right in front of Malcolm Dargo. So it goes Gut, third, Piscopa.
I'd go gut third. Is it Viscopa? But somewhere in there. It doesn't matter too much within tiers, but we're we're just spitballing.
I mean, you asked. Come on.
Yeah,
I do. The thing I have with Viscopa is that from what I've seen in different variants, there has been some consistency issues, but also too, it's a very unforgiving deck, right? One mistake, like one forget to pop the trigger, or forget you had like you tapped the wrong land because it's very mana intensive and it's very color pip intensive. So the deck does punish you incredibly for a misplay.
that's true. But yeah, good A tier deck.
Oh,
Um,
for sure.
let's go on
100%.
ahead and move on to Disciple of Deceit. I'll let
All
you
right.
start us off on this one.
All right. I actually don't have too much to say about this deck. So I've only seen the deck play a few times. I have spoken about it in the past, saying I want to see more players pick this deck up because I believe it has great potential. The most recent list by Dallas Walker, I would have to get more of their opinion on the deck as a whole because to me, just visually looking at the list, it looks clunky. Now, that could be completely wrong, right? It may not play that way, but just there's a lot of 3 drops. There's a lot of like certain spells to be able to go get that exact mana cost in your deck when you're using the ability. So a lot of hands are very dependent on getting your tap triggers, right? Like the Moth Dust Changeling, Springleaf Drum, and things of that nature. So it needs to mulligan one aggressively. And when you do that, you may not have the right cards in hand to do it. So I think this is one of the hardest decks to really make a good, like, even an assumption about. Let's be realistic here. It's a very complicated deck.
Yeah. I actually think this is probably one of the next projects I'm going to be working on. I think once again, shocker, Dread Return's a good card. I think Dread Return specifically is actually insane for this deck. Um, being able to use either Dread Return or Archaeomancer to tutor for the other, and then like if you need the Archaeomancer in hand but you draw it and you still want the Dread Return in graveyard, you can just discard your Archaeomancer, tutor your Dread Return, and cast your Dread Return. Get back the Archaeomancer, and Archaeomancer gets back whatever, and you still have the Dread Return in yard. So I think Dread Return with Archaeomancer is a really strong pairing for this deck specifically. And having a tutor in the command zone is very strong. And one thing that I saw Dallas doing a lot whenever I played against them, specifically, Bobby was on Floodgate, so there was a 0 power creature to attack into a lot of the time.
Oh,
But
that's yeah, that's really smart.
Disciple was able to swing a lot in our pod and not be threatened by blockers and just not have to find a tap enabler, just able to kind of swing in and untap naturally. So
Yeah, I can see that.
uh, where do you want to put the deck?
Well, it sounds like you have a little bit more experience with this deck than me. On my first assumption, I would say it's B, not A. Um, but sounds like you've seen it play a little bit more than I have, so I'd let you make this call.
um I could see an argument for like top of B maybe, but I kind of want to put it in low A. I think this deck has a lot of potential, and I think the reason we haven't seen it much is, like you said, just because it's so complicated. And like
Hmm.
you can literally do anything you want with this deck, because you have a tutor in the command zone that's
Well,
almost unconditional.
I
Um,
do appreciate cards like Exhume and stuff like that in this deck that don't see play at all except for in a deck like this, pretty much. So like the Peregrine Drake combo and stuff like that, I really like in this deck. But it's just I wasn't thinking about Dread Return. All those cards actually really helped this deck a lot. So I could actually see you saying, top of B or bottom of A?
I'm gonna throw it in bottom of A for now, um, and we'll see where it goes if we
I
decide
hope
to
you
change things up.
I hope you back that up by playing
I do
it.
want to work on this deck. I think Dread Return is insane for this deck, so I want to work on it a bit.
All right. Well, take us away on the next one.
All right, the next one is Etherium Sphinx. This is a deck that, to my knowledge, hasn't seen much tournament play, but has had a lot of success in the online meta. It's just a big affinity cascade card. I don't even know at this point if the main lists are on combo. I believe the main decks are on flicker combo for this though.
They are, and
Um,
dramatic reversal as well.
and dramatic. Okay. So this is a deck that I don't actually have much experience with. I heard a lot about it when it was getting played, but I never really experienced it myself. I think it's okay. I mean, being able to cast rocks naturally and ramp and have that give you additional value by reducing the mana cost of your commander is strong. It's a commander that you don't necessarily want to remove because you don't want to give them extra cascade potentially.
Well, so I actually have a lot of experience against this deck. And I've seen both sides of this deck. So I've seen the insane top deck end the game, right? But I've also seen the insane top deck late game where you're hunting for almost anything and you hit Arcane Signet and you just lose the game. So I've seen the polar opposites of this deck play out. And I mean, the deck is good, but leaving something to chance is not where I like to be when I'm playing in competitive. So I would just vote for this one to be in B tier. I think it's good if you're a great pilot with it, but you really have to kind of go with the flow, right? You have to continue to hit your triggers, continue to see what you develop by almost accident, right? Because you're going to continue to cascade over and over again. And the one cascade you never want to do, which is where I've seen the biggest downfall with this deck, is where you accidentally hit your Peregrine Drake and you're like, oh no, and they see it just happen and you don't have the other half of the combo in hand. And it just pretty much ends you right there.
Yeah, one thing I don't like about this deck is that you're playing combo and you are actively discouraged from playing counter spells to protect your combo because you don't want to hit them with your commander. I think that's really rough.
It plays a few, but
It
they're
plays a
like five
couple,
mana.
yeah, but
Yeah,
like
they're a lot of mana.
you're
They're
not
modal
happy.
spells.
Yeah, you're still not
Yeah.
happy to see them off your commander, and hard casting them is like I'm really paying 5 mana for this mana leak.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
uh, I don't know. But if you think it's B tier, we can leave it in B tier.
Well, I don't want to be too mean to the deck. I used to play it against it way back in the day with Dargo and Armix. That was the deck that I used to be able to beat this deck because of Pestilence and things like that. Didn't matter what they cascaded into, Pestilence just kept it off the field. If you were going to ask me today, I would think it would go right next to Armix and Dargo because those are the decks of that era.
That's where I
But I,
wanted to put it personally.
yeah, I mean, we could put it there. I just feel like it has potential, and with new cards continuing to come out, you're only going to get better artifact cards. Because in theory, right, you could cut all the combo pieces out and just make not an aggro deck, but just like a big beat down, big dummy deck, right?
Yeah.
Whether that's competitive is another story, though, right?
And we did get some more artifact support for blue in this set, and blue will always get artifact support, like you said. So
Exactly.
we can leave it in B tier for now. I'll leave it in bottom of B. But yeah, do you want to take us on to our next deck?
I would love to take this one on. All
Alright.
right, this one is going to be a good one. This is Phyrexian Sensor. It's just kind of had its debut here recently. It did play in RIW. It was that pilot specific first time playing. That was a Scooby, and they love the deck from everything I know. about the event itself, and so do I. Um, as you know, I did assist in the building of this deck as a whole, and with more sets coming out, I think this deck will only ever get better. It will never go backwards. And generous gift and things of that nature, like having all of these redundant spells that this deck provides, it's so incredibly consistent. And it's all right, here we go. It's the stack deck of the format. I said it. Here we go. And it does break parity on Phyrexians. It does break parity with the Rebels. So it does do those things. So it does perform and accomplish it what it sets out to do. Now, what it does poorly is that it does restrict players to one spell turn. Obviously, that's what the card reads. And that does complicate things for your opponents, which does make them play a little bit long in the tooth. So you have to be incredibly fast and consistent and remind your opponents to keep pace with you to be able to end the game, which is something this deck does struggle with.
Yeah, it struggles with that, and I think the deck just doesn't end the game very quickly in general, regardless. It can if it gets cards out like the unicorn. I can't think of the name, but the board pump abilities are very good for actually ending the game. But you don't really have any consistent way to find those in the deck, especially if you're limited to one spell a turn, and they're not rebels, which is unfortunate. And yeah, like I've went out and said before, you don't have any hard stacks pieces in the 99, so you are really relying on your commander to be your stacks piece, um, which can be difficult, depending on the decks. Like some of these top decks, like if I'm playing Gretchen, I am pretty happy to see this at a table, honestly, because I have card draw as an ability in my command zone. This is probably pretty annoying for Abdel.
This is horrendous for Abdel. Abdel hates this matchup. I've done this matchup, and it Suture Priest and a Stave Off, and all of these cards are horrendous for Abdel to play against.
Now, to be fair, once again, there's no way to tutor the Suture Priest, and Abdel can still get value by casting Ghostly Flicker 4 times a turn cycle, and it still has that grind engine that is very consistent, so I don't think it's as bad as the Malcolm matchups into Phyrexian Sensor, but it's a bit worse than Gretchen into Sensor. I think Malcolm decks specifically do struggle a lot.
They struggle quite a bit against this.
Because you kind of have to put your Reckless Fire Weaver into play, pray it doesn't die during the turn you do that, and then have it survive a turn cycle so that you can change its type. Obviously, Malcolm can get around this with the creature, Image Crafter, and Amoeboid Changeling, and the equipment that transforms creature types, and things of that nature. Malcolm can combo with only casting one spell a turn, but then once again, you're doing it without protection. And Standard Bearer is also an issue for Malcolm decks, so.
Yep. So where would you like to put this one? I think this is actually a hard put here.
Yeah, it's tough because it does really. Okay, it does really good against Malcolm decks.
It's horrendous against Gut. It's horrendous against Gut.
It's awful against Gut.
Horrendous against Gut.
Not great against Gretchen. It's fine against Abdel.
It's good against Tatiova. It's good against a lot of those.
It's good against some of the higher combo decks, but it's bad against a lot of these more aggressive decks. Dargo decks, not great. I think Abdel Agent is probably a bad matchup for Sensor as well.
Yeah, the sacrifice creatures are very. Dargo is horrendous. Armix Dargo just destroys it.
And yeah, with time issues and some super volatile matchups where it doesn't like to see any of these decks at the table particularly, I kind of want to put it in C tier.
I'd be okay with it in C tier. I do want a quick caveat is that new card, which I the name is eluding me, is the new 5 mana board pump. Is a big deal for this deck. For the fact that it is a permanent pump that you give to the table, and it's just like you were saying, the deck does struggle to end the game sometimes. So that card will assist this, and with, like I said, the more and more cards we get like that, the better this deck does become. So that is instantly going in this deck, and you could also flicker that, which this deck plays a lot of the flicker spells for value. So I think this deck will only go up in value, and I'm alright with having it in C. It does stone cold the Etherium Sphinx deck though. it just
Yeah, that's true.
oh, so that makes me want to put the Sphinx deck over here and see because I'm
Unless
not
they're
comfortable with
playing,
it being above.
if they're
But
playing value Sphinx, I think it does perfectly fine against Sensor because you just get the time to hard cast your 5 and 6 drop cards, anyways.
not at all. I watched. So you would think that, and I also think that, but I watched their first game after I was exiled from my first game by the young man gentleman there with my same name. He I went over and watched Scoop's game, and there was an emoji player at the table, and they were
Okay,
just sitting there twiddling their thumbs, just watching the rest of them play Magic. So
that sounds like an emoji deck that's not playing Colossal Dreadmaw. But anyways,
Uh,
pure Sight Merrow. Um, I'm just gonna be completely honest. I have seen this in a game one time ever. Um, this is just a deck that I don't have that much experience with at all. But it's a Azorius Banishing Knack combo deck, High Tide combo deck. Uh, I don't know. It seems like why play this over Abdel?
I
That's my
mean,
initial reaction.
yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of different commanders I would play over this just from the get go, right? Even Ojai or blah, but I just don't. Yeah, I've never played against the variant that is on that list. So I've played against this card specifically, but not that variant. I've never played against a Banishing Knack version of this, so I don't really have a lot to say about it either. Um, I think we have to just default to D because no one even plays it.
Yeah.
Uh, Once it shows up, change your mind.
Yeah. Someone bring this to a tournament and just like crush with it and prove us wrong. Cause I do want to see this deck. I think it's an interesting card, but yeah, I just have like hardly ever seen it, so I can't really rank it. And I don't know. I don't imagine it being as good as some of these other decks, but I could definitely be wrong. So,
Yeah, and I have the same sentiment. So yeah, I agree. Bring it. Please prove us wrong. I'd love to see it.
but you want to talk about Rocco?
I think yeah, this is a good one for the both of us because we did do that stream about Rocco specifically. Um, I think this deck's amazing. I'm gonna start out just by saying that this also falls with that Disciple of Deceit problem. This deck has so many lines. You tutor for the wrong creature. You need to know what you're tutoring for. Give yourself the numbers game and what is still in your deck. Um, I don't think this deck has a consistency problem like people have said in the past. I think this deck is incredibly consistent. And because it's so consistent, I think that's why it has a problem winning. Because it's just going to show you it wins on turn 5 all the time, which it doesn't appear to look that way at first. Because, like, you could go turn 2 priest and they're like, I'll just kill the priest. And then you still present the win on turn 5 or turn 6, right? And the other thing that really surprised me about Rocco, and this, so I find this a big deal about Rocco. I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant. When I was first putting a Rocco list together, there were so many more combos in Naya that I had ever known about. I mean, there are different persist combos. There's so many different devoted druid lines. There's a 5 mana white devoted druid in our format. I forget the name is slipping my mind at the moment, but it's a 5 mana.
Cleric.
Yeah, and I mean, there's just so many different lines that you could play with this deck. And I mean, you could do a curiosity combo with Rocco, right? There's just so many things you could do with this deck. So, with that said, I think that's one of the problems that this deck does have. The possibilities are endless, and we don't have that one true dedicated Rocco player putting in rep after rep, figuring out, no, you don't need this card because of this reason. And yeah, that's what I got. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, after playing our brew, I think the deck is crazy consistent. It's very much from turn 5 to turn 7, I will try to win every turn. Um, the deck does have issues, obviously. One being that you are very open about what you're trying to do. But the other issues that I have with the deck are that it's not very good at being able to protect itself because you have to devote so much mana and cards to ramping, and then like most of your deck is just devoted to ramping and combos. Or if you're not on combo game plan, if you're on like slivers or something, you have to play all those slivers. So it's not great at protecting itself, and you don't get many slots for interacting with other players either, which is obnoxious. You do get some decent toolbox creatures, like once again, you can play Standard Bearer and Suture Priest, things of that nature. But devoting your Rocco tutor to those instead of trying to win the game is pretty slow, and I would only do that at tables where there's like two flicker decks at the table. I'll consider tutoring a Suture Priest maybe.
Yep.
Um, it's just yeah, and once again, there are so many lines, and I think the deck is very strong and very consistent, but it's I've found it very difficult to actually win. I find a lot of times you just become the arch enemy because you basically guarantee that if you get ramp on turns 1 through 3, you are going to be trying to win the game for like the next 3 turns, and then everybody is just trying to stop you from doing that because it is basically a guarantee that you will win the game if no one does. And
Yep.
then you just kind of hand the game to someone else. So I kind of want to put it in B tier with the other 3 mono decks that are really strong but in a similar boat. That's how I feel about it.
I kind of like it in C. The only reason I say that is because it's just so hard to pilot and it's so unforgiving. And with it not being able to protect its own lines, sure, it could win, but I mean, has it? Right? Like, have you won games with it thus far?
I've won games. I think I
Okay.
have about a 25% win rate with it because
Okay.
some games nobody has the answer and you just win.
And yeah.
Same as some of those other decks, but yeah, I think that's fair. Also the mana base is difficult to figure out. But yeah, I'm gonna put it above Dargo Armix, but below Parcel Beast. Um,
All right. I
I
can see
think I'm
that.
fine with that.
All right. Take us away on the next one.
Witherbloom Apprentice, another deck that has not seen much tournament play and hasn't seen much online play recently either. It got played a lot a long time ago, and it's kind of fallen off. I know Ryan has picked up Thrill Parasite um, over this deck, I think. I think this deck is fine once again. I don't think Golgari is a great color combination right now. Um, the card itself is decent. It helps against those aggro matchups, just incidental life gain. It gets some good control pieces with the black control pieces. All green really adds to the deck, though, is just ramping, which is fine, especially since it's land ramp, which means it can help fuel your Pestilence and your Crypt Rats. And we did get another Black Sweeper. So there's something there, but the deck doesn't win super efficiently unless you're like casting a Weather the Storm on someone else's combo turn. You can just kind of like win the game. So it does technically have like instant speed wins, but they rely on someone else kind of just going off. But you know, if Abdel starts casting infinite ghostly flickers, you can pretty safely assume that no one else has any interaction, and then you just have to pray that Abdel can't deal with it. But it's a bunch of triggers on the stack, so how are they gonna deal with it, right? So there's
Yep.
something there, but
I think this is a product of its time as well. I think this is very similar to Dargo and Armix, very similar to Armix and Ghosts, like that era of playing, right? So where you have these hard control decks that are just slow and grind you into the dust, right? Very similar. So this was a big deck during that era as well. And it is not a bad deck. It has great control aspects. I mean, it goes toe to toe with the Ghost and the Dargos and the Armixes, right? But it really struggles to win quickly. It is just poking to death. I actually had a friend of mine here locally who made Witherbloom, and he brought it to one of our playing sessions, and he never brought it back again because all of us we were at my house for like 10 hours. We got 2 games in. They were the most miserable games ever because he made a turbo fog variant, so it's just like fogs and tangles, and it was so miserable. And yeah, it was just slow though. I mean, he won, don't get me wrong, but it was just slow. And with the timers and everything we have, yeah, I don't think this is really able to compete nowadays.
yeah. The one thing that I will give to Golgari specifically in general is being able to crop rotation for a Bajuka Bug at instant speed. That's pretty nice.
Yeah, that
Um,
is actually an amazing play.
but yeah, I'm fine with throwing this in D tier, unfortunately.
All right. Our next one is I'm gonna just go out there and say this is Slippery Bogle. Um, I have never played against this deck before. Do you have any experience against this?
It's another deck I've played against like once. Um, doesn't see much representation in the online meta. Um, I don't think it's seen any tournament representation so far. Once again, we haven't had that many tournaments, so feel free to show
Well,
up with this if you think it's good. But
I I had a friend of mine locally had this deck built, and then I don't remember the name of the card. Help me out here if you could. It's the one from the Warhammer 40K, the one that has like Death Touch, Hexproof, Flying, the 3 mana one.
I know what you're talking about, like the Death Touch flyer. Um,
Yeah. So that he replaced Bogle with that. So
those decks
he was
seem
just
pretty different to me, but
um that's what he said. That's the only thing I have to really say
um,
about this deck.
I think this deck is actually getting significantly worse over time, because we keep on getting more and more edicts, and that's kind of the bane of this kind of deck's existence, right? Like in every format,
Yep.
Bogles does not like edicts, and we just keep getting more and more.
Well, once again, right? I think a few of these that we're talking about right now are a product of their era, right? So, like, this seems insane against any Armix deck, right? You put this into play, and Armix just goes, "Well, what do I do?" And it just smashes your face in. So, this card makes a lot of sense in that time frame with the Armixes and the ghosts of the day.
Yeah, and I will say the thing about Simic that I think makes Simic really strong and well represented in our format is blue is a strong color in general, but I don't think green is
Definitely.
particularly strong. I think it's an okay supporting color, but I think the commander options we have in Simic are just very powerful with like Gretchen and Tatiova. Like I think that's what really brings out the power in Simic is just getting rewarded for ramping and playing the Simic game. And Slippery Bogle doesn't do that for Simic. It's just like doing something different and unique, which is not always the best thing for competitive play, unfortunately.
Yep. Well, take us away on the next one.
Yeah, let's talk about a Simic deck that I think is good. Um, Ley Weaver, Lore Weaver. This deck is very similar to Gretchen. It has the mana outlet in the command zone, just like Gretchen does. It's a Simic freed from the real land enchantment deck, just like Gretchen. But the difference is this deck has the land untapper in the command zone that doesn't need any land enchantments to go infinite with freed from the real. Major upside right there. A couple, well, I guess the downside is that both your commanders cost 4 mana, so they are slower to come out. You don't get to just use it as a blocker because they're 2/2s, not 0/4 like Gretchen. One thing that I do want to talk about specifically, because as you know, one of the big Gretchen people in the format, this gets brought up to me a lot. Gretchen cost 2 green blue to activate, and Lore Weaver cost 5 blue blue to activate. So, if you wanted to draw 2 cards, yes, technically Lore Weaver is 1 mana more efficient and much less pip intensive. However, you have to take into consideration that activating Gretchen can be done in increments, so if you only have 4 mana left over, you can activate Gretchen and you can't activate Weavers. And Gretchen puts a land into play, potentially, which means if you put a land into play, she is the same mana efficiency, and if you put 2 lands into play, she is more efficient. So, those are my general thoughts. I still think the deck is very good, but what are your thoughts?
So I'm actually going to talk about some play patterns that I've seen you perform with Gretchen over the Weavers, right? And I think most notably for Gretchen, which is such an upside that a lot of people disregard, is being a 0/4. The 0/4 is incredibly relevant with her. Um, I've seen you absorb a lot of Dargo damage with Gretchen on the back. You know, just continue to recast her over and over just to keep absorbing the Dargo hit. And you cannot do that with these Weavers, right? You are not throwing them under the bus. You are protecting them. So that is a whole different aspect of the deck. That's why I understand when people make a lot of comparisons to the decks because they are same style and trying to accomplish the same thing. I do think the decks are actually quite different as a whole because you're not just randomly throwing on turn 2 your commander in play and using it as a wall, right? So, with that said, I do think this deck is incredibly powerful. One of my best friends here locally plays it, and he loves the deck. He enjoys that his win conditions are in the command zone for obvious reasons, right? So, if you're going to ask me, I would like to keep this in the A category. I think the deck is powerful. Um, I'm not sure if this is a hot take, but it may be for some people. But I do think this deck is better than Tatiova as a whole. In the right hands with certain pilots and the way I've seen both decks perform, I have appreciated Weavers more.
Yeah, I think this deck is also A tier. I think this deck is very strong. This was actually my first deck of playing Pauper Commander. Um, and yeah, it is very strong, very consistent. Another notable thing about the difference between playstyles is that you don't play as many land untappers in the deck for Weavers as you do Gretchen, because Gretchen doesn't have that in the command zone, which means you get to play more interaction, but you also have to protect your commander because it is basically your main untapper. Whereas Gretchen gets to run out a land untapper, and then run out a land untapper, and then run out a land untapper, and use them as value pieces and combo pieces. Whereas
Yep.
people do not see Ley Weaver as a value piece if you are casting it. It is always considered a combo piece.
Yep.
So it is even a higher priority than Gretchen land untappers, which is crazy to say. But yeah.
Well, also too, this is a quick little note. I think really needs to be said. I've seen many people make the mistake of killing the Gretchen over killing the land untapper, and I've seen that time and time again. Which, in theory, you would think that's the right thing to do, but until you understand the way the Gretchen deck functions, you'll understand why you don't make that play pattern, right? So,
Yeah, don't kill the Gretchen, guys. Kill the land untappers. I'll give you the honest answer to my deck. I don't care. Um,
yep.
but yeah, you want to talk about Winding Constrictor?
I've literally never seen this card played.
Me either. Um, I think
um,
this deck was in the top 8 of the last Riches to Rags, I think is why it's on here. But yeah,
got
it's
it.
a deck that I have literally never seen. Um, I've seen similar styles of decks, and I've been pretty unimpressed by them, to be quite honest.
Yep. I mean, this is very similar to the other one. I don't think we could give a proper assessment on this at all. I mean, we'll just put it in D because we really don't know.
Yep.
And
If we don't know,
yeah,
we're putting them in D tier, and you guys can prove us wrong. But
yeah, we'd appreciate it because we don't know them all. So,
alrighty.
all right,
Well, you want to talk about Rilsa Rael instead then?
yeah, let's do good old Rissel. So this, in my opinion, is much better than Passageway Seer. Let's just start off with that one. The fact that you're getting the secondary color is right off the bat is just great. Two color commanders in this format are fantastic, and she has Death Touch, which is the most random thing on the planet, but it is fantastic that she has that. And then she has a big butt. So now this card is just everything about this card is great. The other thing I think that this card also brings to the table is it's a enter the battlefield trigger and you're in blue, so you can make this a combo flicker deck. I have yet to see one. The current one is piloted by Ryan. That deck is more of a mid-range deck, but it uses small to the ground creatures as evasion and uses the initiative triggers to make them larger and then ninjutsus them and things of that nature. So it's a very well constructed deck. It's slow and steady, but it definitely wins the race with the initiative triggers. The thing I do not like about Rissel now and her negatives is that she's 5 mana. That's a lot. So she's not being turboed out. She's just slow and steady, right? She's going to just hang out there with you guys. And so, call me crazy, but this is something that I've been seeing here lately. And a lot of initiative has been getting pulled from decks, right? So, like Dargos and a lot of these other decks, like even Rocco and stuff like that, has pulled the initiative creatures out of the decks. And with that, if you're Rissel back in the day, your opponent would get the initiative. You wouldn't even have to cast her. You could just use your evasive creatures to steal it from opponents. That is almost no longer the case. Now the case is you have to play your Rissel first, gain the initiative. Someone attempts to take it from you, and you continue to take it back or hold on to it. So the dynamic of the deck has changed a bit as of recently. And I don't think a lot of the initiative creatures are bad. I actually think a lot of them are very good cards. My Armix and Dargo deck was completely based around initiative and Monarch and things of that nature. So I am a fiend of those cards as well. But I'm I'm very interested to see how the format continues to develop with the initiative and see where it goes. What do you think of that?
I think this deck is pretty good. The nice thing about Rilsa Rael is that she pumps creatures as well, which means that she kind of helps turn the 1 mana 1/1 unblockable creatures into you know, six
Big
ones, which
beefies.
is
Very good.
significantly better. So she
Yep.
does make those small cards much better and not just dead cards. Um, I actually think this deck is pretty good. Even though initiative has been falling off, I think that this deck is still good.
Yeah. Agreed. Where do you think it? I can't see it above Tatiova. I'm gonna be brutally
Yeah,
honest with you.
I don't see it above Tatiova, but I think I can put it like right under Tatiova, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I think the deck is solid, right? You can't if this deck is sitting with you at the table, you cannot ignore it. You it cannot, right? I mean, you get some of the best spells in our format, right? Like Snuff Out and Crypt Rats, and if you hit a Crypt Rat off of initiative trigger, whoo, baby,
Yeah,
you are in the driver's seat. So
Crypt Rats off of initiative is pretty game ending.
exactly. So
But yeah,
yeah, I like
um,
it.
I'm sure Sprite Dragon is one you might want to talk about.
I'll take this one. I'll take this one. So, Sprite Dragon. Um, to the best of my knowledge, this is a 1v1 commander. So we'll just start out by saying that. And from what information was given to me, I was also told that the Sprite Dragon players at RIW were under the assumption it was 1v1, not, 4 players. So, yeah, I think this is here kind of by accident, but let's be honest, it got to the top. So that's kind of a big deal. And the other thing with Sprite Dragon is it's fast. I mean, it is fast. You can build it any way you want to. I believe the version that did get up there though was a combo variant. I know there's a Peregrine Drake in the list. I don't know if their combo pieces though were in it.
I don't
I don't
think it
remember.
was combo. I think there was just a Peregrine Drake.
Okay. Well, the deck was fast. I mean, it's playing cards like Gutshot, right? Like that's just insane to think about. Gutshot's good for the record. It hosed me round one. Um, so yeah, I'm not sure how to feel about this card though. To be brutally honest with you, if I was gonna play Is It and I was gonna play something along these lines, I would play Crackling Drake over this. Um, but it did perform quite well. I do know there was a lot of politicking going on throughout the matches. So how do you feel about this one?
So, actually, most of my experience against this commander comes from 1v1. I played against this in 1v1 a lot, and it was absurdly oppressive. Like, just almost unbeatable, I'm gonna be honest. Maybe not anymore, but when I played 1v1, it was. Whew. But honestly, I was pretty impressed with it in multiplayer. It still struggles to deal with all 3 players consistently, but you are an Is It, so you can very easily protect your commander against things like edicts because you have access to counter spells, which is very nice. Um, and being 2 mana with haste is pretty valuable, and
Yep.
the counters are counters, so they stay. Honestly, I think I'm kind of convinced that I like this more than Crackling Drake right now. Um,
Um, it has a major flaw. If you bounce this, they are the saddest. And I know you can protect it, but like it does still die to the edicts. It does still get bounced and reset. It does have a lot of
it's true that
easy
it
ways to
dies to
take care of it.
edicts, but you're also an Izzet, so you have a lot of ways to protect against bounce spells. You have access to Pyroblast and Reb. You have cards like Alexi's Cloak to give this thing Shroud. Um,
Yep.
and it doesn't die to sweepers for most of the game after like turn 3, and you're not really going to see them before turn 3. So I I want to put this in C tier. I'm gonna be honest. I think it's got some decent legs.
Yeah, I could see it. I was impressed with its showing. My round one didn't obviously it smothered me. The young gentleman by the name of Jackson, 13, looked me in the face and said, "There can only be one." And I was like, "All right," and he obliterated me off the planet within the first 10 minutes of the match. But he did have to exhaust every resource he had to take me out, and it was the other two players were able to just pick up the pieces and get them off the board. So I do think the deck does have legs as well, though. But I'm gonna stick to my guns. I would be playing Crackling Drake over that, but I could see C for sure, definitely.
Alrighty. Well, let's talk about Aranis with Street Urchin. Um, I'll go ahead and start us off, I suppose.
Go for it. I have a lot to say about this one, so
Yeah, so I'll keep it short for the sake of time. This is probably like almost 100% the best Growl deck in our format. Um, it's a very strong control deck. The insane value this deck gets off of artifact lands is just stupid, and quite frankly, um, more oppressive than Armix. Um, and yeah, just being able to activate at instant speed, I think makes this like so insane compared to Armix, which feels crazy because Armix is obviously just a very powerful card. But yeah, I think very highly of this deck.
where do you want to put this deck before I go on my small rant?
I'd probably put it in A tier.
Uh, I think the bottom of A or the top of B. The reason I'm gonna say B, and I don't want to give it its A status yet. The one thing that this deck does struggle with immensely is closing the game. It could stop you from winning,
Yep,
but it has trouble winning the game itself still.
that is
That's
true.
my
But I
that
think
is
it's
my
been proven that this deck can win in time, as it did very well in the tournament, and I've been playing against this a lot more online now.
yes.
And it is still very strong. It does struggle in time sometimes, but
Mhm.
I think being able to win the game sometimes and being able to essentially force a tie if you're not winning is not a bad thing. Um,
Mhm.
so I'm fine with
So
like bottom of A.
so now all the positives about the deck, which you kind of already touched upon a lot, right? The death touch, the instant speed. Deck's insane at stopping combo decks. The thing that put this list, the one at RIW, over the top, which I believe a lot of players have been cutting because they're not comfortable at using, which I am also in that boat, is the stickers. The stickers put this deck over the top. I've seen many people play this prior to seeing the sticker variant, and there's very few sticker cards in the deck to begin with, but when you see those cards, this deck is roided up. This deck is insane with those stickers. So if you decide to pick this deck up, I'm going to let you guys know. Keep the sticker cards, play the sticker cards. 2 food tokens for doing nothing is insane. Like, just the abilities that you receive from the stickers, doesn't matter which sticker you get, they're all very powerful with this deck and work really well with it. And that's why I could see this deck being an A. Um,
Yeah.
its deck is really good. A great pilot will consistently put up results with this, and I believe we have that now. So,
Yeah. Stickers are something I'll also talk a bit more about when we get to Teshar. But let's move on to Risen Reef. What are your thoughts on this one?
I actually don't have many good things to say about this one. I'm gonna be honest with you. Yeah, don't hate me, guys. I'm not too high on this. I actually think the deck is almost a meme. Sometimes when I see it play, it just kind of like sits there and looks at everybody, and it's like I'm not gonna do anything but do things here, and then you guys do stuff, and then okay, you killed them. Oh, what happened? Oh, okay. I like it's. I know I'm sounding really mean here, but help me out here. Don't let me drown. Yeah, take this
Well,
over.
I mean, We can just put it down here. It's it's a Simic deck that kind of gets value for playing the game, except you
uh,
have to play elementals, which are not great, especially at common. And it's kind of just like,
yeah,
why play this when I could get value for playing lands with Tatiova and combo lines from it, or card draw
yeah,
by playing Gretchen or Weavers? Like, there's just better Simic options, and I don't think I can justify putting this above D tier.
yeah. I mean, it's I love the card for the record. I'm gonna throw that out there. But yeah, it's just
But yeah, Floodgate.
let let me take this one over. I think we may be a little polar opposite with this one. Let's find out though. I'm gonna go right to the beginning, and I'm gonna say this, and this might shock you a bit. Uh, I'm actually pretty high on this deck for the record. I think it should be damn near towards the top of B or lower end of A. And I know that may be kind of weird to say, but it's mono blue. Mono blue decks are solid. Scholar of the Ages and this should be damn near close to each other. The fact that this Wraths is fantastic. It really holds other decks in place. Um, the negative part about this deck is that it struggles to find its combo pieces because it's just mono blue digging. So you can fall into the trap to where you don't see your pieces to win the game. But this is similar to Aranis Street, right? You can definitely draw out a game with this deck if need be. And it's mono blue, so it's streamlined. It's very great mana base. You're always doing everything on curve, and it's very linear, similar to the Holy Trinity that we were talking about, right? So I like this deck a lot, and once again, this deck in the right hands is terrifying to play against.
Yeah, you wanted to put this a bit higher. I was gonna go C tier, but we can settle on B tier here. The deck can be slow. Um, Once again, like you said, like you kind of have to find a Paragon Drake or a High Tide for combo lines, which can be difficult. But
Correct.
it does have good longevity. It just destroys Gut, which is very nice.
Yeah.
Um, it does
Well,
very well
destroys
against
third path.
aggro.
Yeah.
Um,
Notably, its two worst matches are S tier.
yeah,
So,
that is valid. It
so
does not kill Malcolm's, which is really annoying.
yeah,
And Gretchen can play around this fairly well. You do have
and
to slow
Abdel.
roll. It forces Gretchen to slow roll, which is not bad, but Gretchen can still get around it. Like I played against Bobby in RIW, and the way I played around it was I only had one untapper in play at all times, even though I had more in hand, and I would just activate Gretchen 2-3 times a turn cycle and just play value Thrasios basically and just
Yep.
never overcommit until there was an opening.
That's exactly the same game plan Abdel has against it. It just slow rolls, puts a couple of tokens to beat your face in, and then that same exact line. So it does struggle against the S tier commanders as a whole. But yeah, I like it in B
Yeah,
personally.
but it does oppress a lot of other decks, so we can put it in
Yes.
B.
Yep.
Sir Conrad. This is one that I started working on this a bit after RIW because I think it's decent in the meta. Being a 5 mana mono black commander is fairly rough, but this is an interesting piece because it hurts some combo decks, but none that are prevalent in the format. It hurts like persist loops and stuff because it pings opponents for doing so. But more than anything, this really capitalizes on one aggro deck being at the table, one or two, just because it helps like drain the table out while the aggro does its thing. And then you can just kind of try to control the aggro player afterwards, after they've done some of your dirty work because you are mono black. I think it's an interesting commander, but after playing it some, I don't think it's particularly powerful. What are your thoughts?
So I think there's different versions of the deck. I know Clay at one point was playing a rat variant, and I know the one at RIW was kind of on a turbo plane version of this. Which I do appreciate both versions, but I do agree with you that it does struggle in certain ways. It is a 5 mana commander, and for being a 5 mana commander, I think you need to be kind of like winning the game or giving so much value that you're all right with paying 5 mana, similar to, Tatioba and Rissel and commanders. But I'm also not very high on this card either. Like, if it's not being killed, there's weird things happening at the table. So I kind of like this, as horrible as this is, kind of in D tier.
Yeah,
Not
that's
too
where
high
I
on
want
it.
to put it too. I kind of just like Viscopa more than this. Um, that's how
Um,
I feel about it.
if I was going to play mono black, I would just play loyal subordinate. Um, it's so much more
Yeah.
consistent than this.
But you want to talk about Amber Criminal Past?
Yeah, so notably, this is just one of those decks. So these last two that we have for you guys are decks of our own. So we're just going to kind of talk about it, that we feel that, it's our tier list, so we're going to give it a go, right? So this is Amber Criminal Pass. So I am a huge fan of Amber, and things that we have said in the past are, if your commander could draw you cards, it has legs. So I find this card to be incredibly powerful because once you run out of cards, you're able to reload your hand. So the way this deck has been constructed, I've been working on a variant of every single background and every single color pairing as well. This is the one I found to be the strongest because of Criminal Past. So unlike the other backgrounds, Criminal Past actually gives you natural menace, and it doesn't matter who you're attacking. But the plus X plus 0 turns you into the biggest skeleton in the game, right? So you actually end up getting to one-shot player. So I actually made this a Tortex deck, and it's on 37 creatures, and it could just recycle creatures like Gary, and just so much value. And it actually has a relatively similar game plan to Rissel, where you have a lot of these like 1 or 2 mana unblockable creatures, so you can continue to attack and push through damage and continue to draw your cards with Amber. And you're also just in red and black, right? You get Snuff Out, you get Lightning Bolt. We have some of the most efficient, powerful cards in the game. So the deck is very solid. I enjoy to play it. It's one of my favorite decks to play. I will be playing this deck in events here soon. So this is not something that I'm telling other people to play, and I won't do it. I will 100% be playing this deck here very soon. I love it. It can end the game quick, low to the ground, and very efficient. So, what are your thoughts on this one?
I think this is D tier. um, like the deck has a lot of decent cards. Like it has a lot of just the good Rakdos stuff, and like card draw in the command zone. But a lot of times I've seen Amber just some for some reason struggle to close out games, which is crazy. Like looking at the command zone and you're in Rakdos and all this stuff. I don't know. Sometimes Amber just struggles to actually get there, especially if you do go all in on like an early Amber with rituals and it gets removed.
So,
Oh god.
so let me hit you with this one. So, I actually replaced my Dargo and Armix with this pairing, Amber and Criminal. And the reason I did it was I was able to go turn one weird dork creature, like weird little unblockable little funky dude, and then I would just go turn two culling, slam an initiative. Because of those play patterns, this is one reason why I think what you said happens to me a lot. That does happen to me quite a bit. Um, the deck is not very good at hiding what it's doing. It just slams what it has on the table and then just keeps churning through the deck. Because it also had some very awkward draws in its beginning stages with rituals and stuff, where you just draw 3 cards with Amber and you draw 3 rituals, or 2 rituals and a land, and you're feeling horrible about yourself. So I definitely do understand it, where you're coming from. I think the deck has legs. I'm gonna be mean to myself though. I think it should be in C tier personally. but because it's seen no play, hasn't been in tournaments or anything like that, I'm okay with putting it in D tier.
Yeah, we'll put it down here. I'll put it right under Crackling Drake. Um, all right, the last one, Teshar. This is a deck that some people probably know I've been working on. Mono white combo is not something you hear every day. This deck is interesting. It has who knows how many combo lines. Like Teshar combos with a lot of things. The problem is that a lot of them require multiple pieces, and the pieces are different depending on what each piece is. So you have to be really, really good with this deck to make it work. And it's mono white. Um, it's not card draw in the command zone, but it is card advantage by turning your artifacts into an extra creature from your graveyard. Stickers really help this deck. There are 3 stickers specifically that replace a combo piece each. There's one that turns anything into its own sack outlet and draws cards. And then there's one that turns anything into a non-creature mirror retriever, essentially. And a third one that turns a creature into, when it leaves, you can bounce a creature to your hand. And all of those are combo pieces for Teshar. So stickers are really, really nice for Teshar. One thing that I think is really good for Teshar specifically in this meta is it actually has a pretty good matchup against decks like Gut. Because one thing the deck struggles with is that it has to find a sacrifice outlet, but it builds up a very large board of blockers, and it disincentivizes aggressive decks from swinging into you because they're essentially giving you a free sack outlet through combat by blocking. What are your thoughts?
So, I've seen this deck play with many different pilots already, as crazy as that sounds. A lot of people have picked this deck up, which I think is really cool. Problem I've seen with a lot of players that have picked this deck up is it sometimes you're literally just spinning the wheel. You're actively doing nothing. You're just sitting there, just spinning wheels, drawing, just doing nothing. You're not progressing your game state. You're just bringing stuff back, netting a card, looking at stuff, seeing you have nothing. There's no way to get Ashnod's Altar right. Like, we can't look for. Maybe we mold to it, sure. I think the deck is going to struggle a lot here in its first few iterations. Even if we find a perfect version, right, for the current time frame, it's still missing a lot. Now, with that said, though, I do think this deck is going to get insane with time. So they're just going to keep giving us cards that are going to really actually make this deck a true competitor.
One thing that I will say is that if we are going to call Standard Bearer and Suture Priest stacks pieces, this deck is a better stacks deck than Sensor.
Those are big words.
Your commander is able to consistently return Suture Priest and Standard Bearer to play. So if they get removed, literally any artifact equals Suture Priest or Standard Bearer. So if they're relevant, they're just always a part of the game unless someone grave hates you, which is one thing this deck hates to see. But you also have flash artifacts in the list currently, which means you can not only win at instant speed on top of someone else's win, but you can also get back cards like Suture Priest at instant speed, which is really nice.
Yep, I agree.
The value engine on this deck is crazy, but it can struggle with consistency sometimes, and it is mono white. But all that said, I think the deck has enough potential that I want to put it in the same tier as Phyrexian Sensor.
I'd give you the top of D, and I say that because it hasn't done anything yet. Similar
Well,
to
yeah,
Amber.
I mean, it's not even officially downshifted yet.
Yeah. So, like, We can't really like. I've at least won a lot of games with Amber, like, and I put Amber in D,
yeah,
so
we'll
I'm
put
not
it
like
in
so
D
biased.
tier. We'll put it in D tier.
Uh,
But yeah, anything else you want to say before we close this one out?
no, man. I just hope everybody enjoyed this little experiment we did. I had a lot of fun doing this, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Once again, guys, this is all for fun. This is not gospel. We're not saying that you have to follow this tier list. And in the description for the video below, I'm going to link this tier maker so you guys can all make your own tier list and share it with us on Twitter or in Discord or any of that stuff. Show us your tier lists. You can add decks, remove decks, whatever you want. Make it your own. But yeah, with that, go ahead and leave a like down below. Check the description if you want to make your own tier list. Subscribe if you aren't already. Leave comments, let us know what you think about this. And we'll see y'all next time.